All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive.
Today, we're tackling a question that's honestly been kind of blowing up my feeds lately. And I know,
Yeah.
yeah, it's something that I think a lot of you have opinions about.
And it's something we haven't really touched on too much before.
We're going to be diving into the waters of money and relationships.
Oh?
More specifically, like, when is it okay to talk about finances with a new partner?
Um, and the question that really sparked this whole thing, and this came from online,
Okay.
was how long should a lady wait before asking a man for money in a new relationship?
Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah,
So much to unpack there.
there is.
Like, where do we even begin?
I know, right?
It's a doozy, isn't it? And you're right, there are so many layers to peel back here.
It might seem simple on the surface, but it gets complicated fast
Yeah.
when you start thinking about societal norms.
The individual values and the actual dynamics of the relationship itself.
Exactly. Like when I first saw that question, I was like, wait, what kind of asking are we even talking about here?
Right.
Are we talking about like needing help to cover rent? Are we talking about asking for a loan?
Or is it more about like gifts or like expecting someone to foot the bill on dates?
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge spectrum.
It is. It is. And that ambiguity is part of, I think, what makes this question so tricky.
Right.
So, for instance, research from the Pew Research Center shows a significant shift in attitudes towards financial roles in relationships.
Over the past few decades, the idea of men as the sole providers
Right.
is becoming less and less common, with more couples valuing
Yeah.
financial independence and shared responsibility.
Which is interesting, though, because even though that's kind of like the trend,
Mhm.
it feels like this original question is almost coming from that place of like,
A more traditional view of like men being the financial providers.
yeah.
It almost implies like there's some kind of timeline,
Uh-huh.
like there's a waiting period.
Before you're allowed to bring up money?
Absolutely. And it also highlights how loaded the act of asking for money can be in a relationship. Depending on the context, it can bring up issues of dependence, power dynamics.
Even potentially be seen as a test of commitment.
Right. It's almost like, are you asking because you genuinely need support?
Yeah.
Or are you kind of testing the waters
Right.
to see how they react?
Exactly.
And then how does all of this play out differently in a relationship where maybe both partners are financially stable versus one where there's
A significant income disparity.
That's such a key point. And I think
Yeah.
it speaks to the idea that,
Financial independence in a relationship doesn't always mean totally separate finances.
right,
It's more about having open and honest conversations about your financial goals, your individual contributions to the relationship.
and what feels fair and sustainable for both people.
And that makes me think about like the practical side of things.
Yeah.
Like if we're talking about shared expenses like rent or groceries,
Mm-hmm.
how do you even begin to broach that conversation early on without it feeling awkward or transactional?
Right.
Any advice for our listeners on how to navigate that?
It's all about transparency and clear expectations from the get-go.
Okay.
Like if you're moving in together, for instance,
Yeah.
that's a great time to have a conversation about how you want to handle bills.
Whether it's splitting everything 50-50 or contributing proportionally based on income or something else entirely.
Right.
And remember, these conversations are ongoing.
Oh, that's a good point.
It's not a one-time thing.
As the relationship evolves,
Yeah.
so do your financial needs and goals.
Okay, so while the initial question was very specific.
About a woman asking a man for money.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like what we're really talking about here applies to any relationship,
Absolutely.
regardless of gender.
100%.
It's about clear, honest, and respectful conversations about money.
Exactly. And I think the more you can normalize those conversations early on, the easier it becomes to address any potential issues.
Before they snowball into bigger problems down the line.
Right, because no one wants to have that big blow-up fight.
Yeah, actually,
Later.
about finances. So for all of you listening, here's a final thought to chew on.
Okay.
What does financial transparency and fairness look like in your relationships?
And how can you create a space where these conversations can happen openly and constructively without shame or judgment?
That's something I know I'm going to be pondering after this.
Yeah, me too.
It's a good one.